to another casual stroll through Middle-earth, or through Lord of the Rings Online, excuse me. My name is Matt Elliott. I go by Scenario on the message boards. I'm a senior world designer on Lord of the Rings. I've been doing this for, basically almost the entirety of the existence of LOTRO. Started out as a production artist and became a world designer for the launch of the game. So, welcome everyone. For those of you that are not familiar with what this stream is, this is a landscape and world design focused stream paying close attention to the wonderful landscapes of Lord of the Rings Online. The places we visit are voted by the community on the message boards. We are down to, after this one more region left in Eriador, the starting region of the game, not including the Etten Moors. We may or may not explore that. And then we'll be moving on to Moria. So we've got North Downs and Breland left to go. We're in North Downs today. Just as a reminder, because this is a world and level design stream, I'm not going to be answering any questions regarding game systems, gameplay, PvP, engineering, lag, any of that stuff, because it's not my area of expertise. I'd much rather answer your questions about what it takes to build the landscape in the world of Middle-earth. So if you have any questions about North Downs, about what's going on with the Yondershire, which is going to be coming out, I believe, tomorrow for our 15th anniversary, or just any questions about what it takes to make, the world of Lord of the Rings, feel free to drop them in chat, and we'll see if I can answer them for you. So we're starting our stream off here in Trestlebridge. This is one of the... Oh, come on. There we go. One of the first towns in the North Downs. You approach it from the south, from Breland, and as you approach, you notice it gets a little, darker and gloomier, and, kind of giving that impression of a town under siege. I think this is one of the, first real places where we tried to impress upon the feeling of, a city under attack. The orcs are coming in. They're trying to set it all on fire, and we have a few houses that are burnt down on this. One of the cool things about this region is when we did the Wildwood expansion to Breland, we opened up some additional passageways here in the back for Wildwood purposes. But one of the fun things that we ended up doing was, through the content of Wildwood, you're actually able to help the folks of Trestlebridge repair in a couple of spots, which was really, really nice to see. So first thing, Stars and Rangers asks, are questions about region lore specific to LOTRO all right? You can try to ask them. I can't guarantee that I will be able to answer them. I'm not as heavily steeped in the lore as other folks on the project are. There are some things that I'm familiar with, both in terms of Lord of the Rings and in terms of the game itself, that I could potentially answer, but there are others where I may not be able to answer those specifically for you. So yeah, this was, I don't think I had any part in building Trestlebridge itself, though I do remember participating in kind of the polish passes of the area way back when the game launched. And one of the things that was a new snazzy feature that we had gotten for the terrain, and you can kind of see it here on the bricks, was the specular highlighting. Was something that we had never had before, and we were doing kind of a polish pass on the game, and adding that little bit of extra specular sheen to the terrain was a really, really big new feature for us back in, 2003. Which seems like forever ago, and it kind of was. But yeah, I've always loved this style of building, the Tudor style of building that, I think we got them specifically for Trestlebridge when we were building things out. And then we ended up, I think, using them in Angmar, and I know I've used them here and there before when it comes time to build more Breland-style houses. So that said, let's run across onto the trestle span. I think this was also one of the first like really big POIs that we had built for the game. It is interesting that it goes from this cobblestone to the brick. Maybe one of these days we'll line it up. We've got the trestle span here, which was huge POI, one of our first like multi-piece POIs for the game. And it's kind of funny, like thinking of this as like a huge POI, considering some of the places we've gone and the things that we've built. Like, this is big in comparison. So Exile King North asks, are we going to see Hobbit new houses, like new premium Hobbit houses? So there are no current plans for new premium Hobbit houses, though we have done some thought work on it, building out like request lists, coming up with ideas about where we might want to put it, that sort of thing. But we haven't actually started construction on it. We don't have any immediate plans at the moment for it. That said, like I think we'd love to do another Hobbit neighborhood at some point. It's just a matter of when we get to it. Demay the Real says, I was wondering about bushes. In almost every area you can run through them. There are areas, though near Fornost, the bushes are really solid. Why are they solid and not in other places? That is likely has to just do with being an oversight. I know that there were some bushes, you run through this one, and originally did have physics to them. And as we were using them in the scene files and hand placing them, it just felt like they didn't need physics. So if there are bushes that are in the Fornost area that do have physics, there may be a reason for it, but more than likely it's just something that, as we were going through and adjusting physics on things, they didn't get hit in that pass. And it's something that we can consider adding to the list. So I do remember building this monster camp here. One of the things when we were working really early on in LOTRO, we kind of had these monster camp design rules, and one of them was always that every camp there should never be just one way into a monster camp. There should be multiple ways in and out of a monster camp, so that particularly if a camp is like a very long haul fight through something, we didn't want you to then have to do the long haul fight back out. There were some exceptions to that rule, particularly in the area to the east of here, which was intended to be a group play. Originally it was intended to be a 6-person group play space in public landscape, and a lot of our original game had these ideas of these public group landscape content spaces, and that's kind of fallen out of the way. And when we do end up introducing those back in once in a while, we actually end up really confusing the player base, because everyone is so very used to not having that sort of thing. They're so used to being able to solo everything, so that when they come across something on landscape, at least that's not just a like one-off monster, it's a little surprising to the players. So this is something that I remember it taking us months and months to build, because of the at the time, the size of it, the complexity of it, what was going on in it. And it's funny just thinking about like building a space like this now, and both in the amount of detail that we would put into it and in just like the amount of time it would take. Like we've gotten so much better and more effective at building spaces like this. So let's see, Soft Snakes here. Is there any project of old showing how Arnor ruins looked like at their prime times? Were they more colorful? So I don't think we have any sort of project kind of showing pristine Arnorian ruins. I think the set was always kind of conceived as this ruined set. There are some that look like they are in better shape than others, both within the Arnorian set and some of the stuff that's used around places like Estelden, which are like hold up a little bit better. They're not as ruined. They're a little bit more taken care of. As far as color and whatnot goes on them, they're brick by and large. That's not to say that if we were to ever do that sort of thing, we wouldn't try to like make things feel a little bit more interesting and stand out a little bit more on the landscape. So let's see. Swift travel revamp in the North Downs. I know it's a matter of time. Yes, I would like to do some of that in the North Downs. Like all of our starter regions, could use that little bit of extra work to help them along, because I think there is a very different mentality that went into building the original travel networks compared to what our modern mentality is. And our modern mentality is, by and large, much more steeped in being respectful of the time that players have, as opposed to kind of forcing them to experience the world. We want to be a little bit more respectful of it and offer them, still maintain the options for players to experience the world via running around in it, via slow travel routes, but also acknowledging that, people have places to go and people to see, and swift travel is a important way to help players kind of streamline their experience through the world if they so choose to. So Greg Parks asks, is it easier to do world building in an area that Tolkien described without the details, or no detail at all? So that can vary. It really depends on the area. Sometimes there is comfort in having a very highly defined space to work in, particularly very complex spaces, because it kind of helps, define the scope of the space. If the letter of the law says, like, this is what it is and this is how it is, and we don't have much flexibility to go out beyond that, then that allows us to kind of build it more concisely and tightly and efficiently. However, there is something nice about having kind of that flexibility and leeway to bring our own ideas to the table, and having just a little bit of a hint here and there of like, oh, well, this town's here and this town's there, and there's this major ruin here, but anywhere else in between it isn't really well defined. Like, that's a great thing for us. And man, I always seem to do my streams when it's raining out. Never fails. I don't think it's raining out outside. I haven't actually seen much of outside today, but in-game, raining in-game. So B414 says, Nan Wathran felt like the first time we got Autobestow quest after Autobestow quest with a long chain quest to complete before heading back to down. Which came first, the landscape or that quest style? The landscape. The quest style, so Autobestow was not a thing when the game launched and this was first introduced. A lot of the quests that you see kind of in this space are quests that were bestowed elsewhere, or they were quests that you picked up from killing something in here. The concept of auto bestow came along. I believe there was a revamp a few years ago of the starter experience to help kind of streamline some of that and reduce the amount of back to the hub that you would have to do, particularly for areas like this, because it's there's always that kind of eye roll moment when you spend hours working your way through this kind of camp, with or without a party, to complete a quest, and you get you get the kills that you need, you get the items you need, and then you have to trudge your way back, and then you get the quest NPC that says, oh, by the way, I also need you to do this, or you missed a quest, and then you have to go back in there. So that's where tools like the auto bestow stuff actually really help. Help to prevent too much back and forth in a region. Let's see. Aside from world building, did you develop some quest arcs? I have done no quests. Oh, well, no, that's not true. So, by and large, I am a landscape designer. I do not typically dabble in things like quests. However, I did do the quests for some of the original resource instances in Moria and Rohan. I did all of those quests. And I've done a couple of deeds here and there. Usually when I've done region deeds, it was because we needed some extra hands to help with them. But I've done some of the kind of more hidden exploration deeds throughout the region. Most recently, the last hidden deed I did came out with Wells of Anduin. Or no, Vales of Anduin. Came out with Vales of Anduin. Exile North King, why not make Swift Travel for free to play? I'm not sure the specific reasonings behind any of that stuff, and because it's kind of more talking about store stuff, I'm not someone that's the right person to ask that question to. I'm the person who can certainly talk about why certain Swift Travel or travel routes in general may or may not exist. Some of them, such as here in the North Downs, are just because we had a different mentality when we were building them, and we felt that less was more. Now we have a very different mentality. You look at something like the Trollshaws or Gundabad, and there's no shortage of travel routes there. So, why do reflecting pools not have water in them? I'm not sure. The assets may have had a water disc as part of the group of assets that was used and placed there in the past, and then that grouping of assets kind of fell apart and hasn't been used since. I could not speak specifically as to that. So Greg Parks asked, do you play LOTRO for leisure at all? Do you find it hard to play the game for leisure? So I do play it for leisure, but there is always a part of my brain that still has it in my head, still doing a little bit of work. So whenever I'm playing the game, if I come across a bug or a graphical issue that I want to get fixed, I'll make a note of it. I've got a draft in my Outlook folder that's just all of the notes that I've had over the entirety of playing the game, from the start of the game up through Gundabad. I'm very close to having the Legacy of Durin Trial of the Dwarves finished on my current main character. I'm playing a Bjorning right now. I had a Guardian up to 130. I'm thinking about making a Brawler, but I want to wait a little bit before I dive into making a new character. Nice thing is we have a bunch of newer, fresher, lower level options now in terms of content for me to get through with the Wildwood and the Angle and the Undershire, so that I'm not feeling like I have to play things over and over again, which is always a challenge. You want something fresh, and that's part of why we're doing what we're doing. Oh, Idaline, you're such a happy person. Let's see. Do you, from Stars and Rangers, do you or does another dev have a particular love of Old Ornar that got incorporated into this region? The lore is really visible and hard work shows. Well, I think, from what I've said previously, we do a considerable amount of research when it comes to building out regions and building out building out any space that we build. So all sorts of auto bestows here. So I think at the very least, we try to hit all of the known knowns. for me, the North Downs, I spent a lot of time working in this area in the fields of Fornost. This was kind of like one of the babies that I was building fairly early on in my design career. I really like the up and down feel. As a more seasoned and senior designer, approaching it, like, I still look at this impassable here, which is kind of between Trestle Bridge and here, where it's just like, oh, I want that to come down at some point, and maybe someday I will be able to tear that wall down. Who knows? Soft Snake says, are there any thoughts of filling in the gap between North Downs and Lonelands? So we have, and this is something that myself and one of our other world designers did maybe about 1.5 years ago, was we have a great big list of, like, here are all the places that we could fill in the gaps. And that space in between the North Downs and Lowlands is one of the spaces that's kind of on that list. Beyond that, basically, until we get to a point where we're like, okay, we're ready to, build this, we don't really put a ton of thought and effort into the particulars of what that space might be or could be. Because we're always busy, we're always working on stuff, so trying to think too much and too heavily about something like that when it's not something that's kind of like on our immediate plate is a little tough to do. Let's see. Has Alright, I'm going through the chat real quick. Did you get any free time to fix the landscape issues that caused any new aspects by the new aspect system used in Gundabad? So update 33 should have some fixes that go in that should fix some of those things. Unfortunately, that issue is kind of a hunt and peck issue where it's like, it's really hard to know where all of the problems are going to crop up, and it's going to take, us going in and trying to, like, do a fix, and if that fix worked, great, but then if someone goes somewhere else and found a different issue, we'll go in and we'll try to fix that one too. So it's kind of going to be like we're fixing as much of it as we can over time, and hopefully some of the stuff that I did over this update will help some of the areas that I've seen reported on the message boards. There may be other things that crop up here and there, and as we find those other things, we highly encourage people to send reports, particularly if you're seeing like texture mix matches. Like a lot of what I was seeing was like, snowy rocks in non-snowy rock area, that sort of thing. What's really helpful with reporting for us is if we can be told, like, here's the location, here's what I'm seeing with screenshots, here's where I was, before I came to this spot and noticed this thing. And I know that can be hard to, keep track of sometimes, but if it's like, oh, I was in the Misty Mountains and then I teleported to Scarhold and then the rocks around Scarhold all look weird, like, that's actually really good information for me to be able to kind of take that and be like, okay, so the problem may not necessarily be with Scarhold, it may be with the Misty Mountains, and I have to go to the Misty Mountains to take a look and see what the problem could be. And yes, thank you for the drink reminders. So this here, the Evendim Gate, I think was one of our first big teases of the world to come. When the game originally launched, this was all blocked off. And I apologize, my allergies are starting to settle in, so that's fun too. So yeah, this was, I've talked about it in the past about how one of the things we like to do when we're building regions is to kind of seed in the idea of a bigger world. So here in Fields of Fornost, we had the Evendim Gate, which blocked off access to Evendim, and, it was kind of that idea that, oh, there's something beyond this. And I think I don't think anyone at the time that we launched the game was really thinking that we would be going to Even Dim as part of that. And honestly, we didn't even really know that that was where we were going post-launch until, we had the dust had settled on the launch of the game, and we were, getting our updates underway, and we were starting to figure out what we were going to do for the live version of the game. So then when we were in Even Dim, we did that with the gate up into Foreshell. So it's something that we like doing, and we will continue to do because it helps kind of ground the game and make it feel more like it's a world than just a game. Yes, so I can see what you mean by these bushes. These bushes may be just because of the size of the trunk, because when you zoom in close, that's really just kind of a small tree. So I can see why the physics might be present on that. Running through this area just does bring back a lot of memories about building this space and building, areas further over here and whatnot. I did a lot of work here in North Downs. I don't think I built much of Fornost itself, but the areas surrounding, I know I spent a lot of time in. Good old jagged trees. One of these days we'll smooth you out, maybe. I remember really, really liking these trees too when we first built them. They were very, very just striking silhouettes and really kind of austere, but they a little bit worse for the wear now as a modern game. And I think Fornost was definitely one of those places where this was a big, ambitious, all hands on deck build out space. And there is a part of me that is I'm glad that from a time available perspective, the having all the different wings sections of Fornost be their own instances is really nice, because I don't feel like I have to spend 6 hours working my way through it if I was trying to get through it on level. But there's a part of me that's a little sad that it is not the full contiguous thing, the full going through. You work your way up to the first tower, and then you go to the top of the first tower, which then gives you access to higher levels in the in the map. I'm a little sad that some of those things don't exist anymore, but that's mostly nostalgia talking there. I think it would have been, I think if I had been on the project at the time, I might have advocated that we maintain the legacy, the way the legacy instance was, and then also include the winged version. So I am going to cheat a little bit and not go into the instance, and instead run around up here. Thorough lore. There's also an issue too. Sometimes your specific hardware settings can cause it to not show up in the way you might want it to show up. Oh, good old Silence Water. You were the bane of my burglar when I was playing through this in alpha and main tanking, main DPSing, main healing, and main crowd controlling. Burglars were busted, is what I was saying in alpha. What I mean to say in alpha. They were super busted. I remember leading a dev playthrough of Fornost when we were doing playtesting on it, and between burglar crowd control options, DPS options, and conjunctions, I was I was the like everything for the team, and it's funny how like that it was just amusing having a hobbit burglar leading like guardians and minstrels and like outclassing them all in all of their individual roles at the time. That has since changed considerably. No, I missed my jump. There we go. It was funny. Very recently, I was talking with one of our other designers about the Arnorian Ruin set and how it never felt like we really used the pieces in a way that felt like we were building actual like keeps and cities, and instead we were building more like more channeled experiences. Um, something more along the lines of like, instead of these crumbling walls representing buildings, they're just representing walls. They're representing obstacles more so than, a space that was built like it was an actual space. So it was more about the like coolness of, arena to arena than building a, cohesive, this could have been an actual like city kind of space. Rocket jump. I always forget how big this space is. This in Garth Garwin, I always forget how big Garth Garwin actually is. Between the open public spaces of Garth Garwin and then the actual instance, like, I always forget how big it feels. And in large part, it feels that way just because of, the way we've, like, constructed the space. Let's see. I'm going to take a look at questions real quick. Love the giant statue arm just outside the entrance. It's such a great feature. Yep. I think that kind of like sets the like mood. Like you're about to walk into some ruined stuff. Hoyabella says, do you paint landscape ideas by hand on paper first before doing them on a computer? So sometimes we work with our art team to produce concept art for an area, particularly if it is a space that has a very specific monument or detail that we want to have captured that we're going to be generating new art assets off of. However, if there's nothing really specific like that, so for example, we had concept art for Weathertop produced. I don't think we had concept art for this produced, though, as an example. I'm going to rocket jump up here because I always loved this view. This was always just like such a great view to me. Like looking out over the whole of the city. Now if only I could do things to knock you off of it. So yeah, like sometimes we do for those specific POIs, usually we don't. Often what we end up doing instead when we are producing a new region is myself or one of the other world designers will go and find source images. So we will do research. We will take the region personality that has been produced by one of our designers. So we'll take that information, the kinds of rocks that are there, trees, cliffs, terrain formations, bodies of water, civilizations. We'll take that information and then we will go and just search for source images. We will go and look for, pictures of landscapes that are representative of that. And then we'll kind of use those as our concepts for an area, using a real world reference material as our concept. See, Exile King asks, "What is your favorite zone?" That's like asking which of my kids is my favorite. Luckily, I only have one kid right now, so I don't have to pick and choose favorites. Um, I think I really like the regions that have kind of a raw naturalness to them. Um, so most recently, I've really enjoyed working in and building and just kind of being in places like, you know, Wells of Anduin, or Wells of Langflood, Vales of Anduin, um, because there's just a rugged naturalness to them that is really, really appealing to me. Um, and I think the ones that I enjoy least are the very, very heavily um, lived in regions. Um, Breland is not one of my favorites because there's just so much going on in there. Um, Going through Gondor, while it looks great, I never really enjoyed going through Gondor because those, and this is just me, like I'm not a big city person. I'm not a big fan of cities. So something like Gondor, where it's like big city after big city back after big city, like I sometimes get a little exhausted, in the same way that I would get if I was spending a lot of time in Boston. Uh, and yeah, so yeah, that kind of that covers that wistfulness topic. So did you paint? Let's see, going down through. Um, Fornos looks really big when you can run around it and all of it. Yeah, and I think like Fornos was one of those things where it's like you could be in that instance for several hours in order to complete it just because of how big it was, which was both cool and a little bit like much and disrespectful of people's time. But it was also a very different environment as far as MMOs were concerned back then. Um, uh, Thuralore asks, have you worked with Orion in the past? Orion and I go back very, very far. Um, Orion and I worked together on Asheron's Call. He was a designer and I was an artist on Asheron's Call. We worked very closely on Lord of the Rings as well. And actually, we worked together at CVS for a little bit too. I was the one that helped introduce him to hiring managers and whatnot at CVS. So we've had a lot of history working together, and him coming back, and even within the last week, it's been great just being able to have just like high level design conversations with him again. I'm really glad that he's back. It's like I think one of the things that's always been fun about working for SSG is it really is getting the band back together. This game development family has been together for so long, and it's always nice to have, a member of the family come back. Let's see. Are instance landscapes a thing of the past? Only Harrowing of Morgul, Glimmerdeep come to mind since Militaris. Well, actually, technically, Steelkeep was a landscape instance as well. It may not have looked like it, but it was. It wasn't a dungeon space at all. I think a lot of the landscape-based instances are all things that are based off of the location and need for them. So we're not going to say, no, we're not doing them anymore. It's more if it makes sense and fits for what we're doing, then we'll do it on landscape. Often, one of the questions that came up for the Hidden Horde when we were first developing it was, should we put the Hidden Horde as a landscape instance? Does it make sense developmentally for us to build it as a landscape instance? for the number of people that are going to be working on it? Is it better or worse for it to be done on landscape? Like those sorts of things were questions and conversations that we have for all of our bigger things. You know, like Shelob's Lair we were originally thinking about doing it on landscape, and there were developmental concerns around that. Just because of the sheer size of what we were making, we weren't sure if building it as a landscape instance was going to... Oh, poor lady. The one person in the entire town of Stone Height. That's actually really sad. So it's something that we think about whenever we're going to build a larger instance, is like, would landscape serve this instance appropriately or not? Like, does it make sense for us to do it in this way? And if the challenges presented by doing it as a landscape instance would be greater than the benefits of it being on landscape, we usually end up not doing it on landscape. So let's see. So yeah, Shadow Cat says, so you must love Minas Tirith. I find myself very stressed out in places like Minas Tirith just because of it's a city and there's a lot going on. Rebuilding the Minas Tirith for the Midsummer Festival was actually really interesting on a technical level, because it was one of those where it's like we knew that there were performance problems with Minas Tirith, and we wanted to try to resolve them the best we could. And I do know I need to speed things up a little bit. I don't know if there's anyone coming on the show directly after this. So if we go over a little bit, maybe that's okay, but someone will yell at me if that's not okay. We knew that there were performance challenges with the original Minas Tirith, and one of the things that we set out to do when we were working on the Midsummer version of it was to try to find ways to address some of those issues. Now, I know it still has some of its own perf issues, but hopefully the work we did both helped inform the work we would want to do in the future for other similar large city structures. But also was just kind of an opportunity to kind of sit back and think about building more tactically. Like, you know, do we use platform entities for this instead of landscape? Instead of, you know, maybe if we use landscape, we use terrain textures that are, you know, multiple different terrain textures that are colored in different ways to suggest, and different angles to suggest a different style, as opposed to using platforms that we rotate to create something that looks different. So that's where it was like interesting to me. And there are times too where we were like going through it and I was like, there are still other things that I probably wouldn't mind doing to Midsummer to help it along. All right, so we're at a crossroads here. There's this weird path leading to the mountains. There's nothing there, so I don't know why we would go that way. So let's go this way instead. All right, so let's look at a couple questions and comments. So the way Moria is made is so great. I love Moria the most. Moria is interesting. I think we had a lot of fun, and it was a lot of work to build. For me, as I play through Moria, and then I go through some of our more modern stuff, particularly go through Gundabad, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of like detail that we were able to put into Gundabad that Moria feels like it's lacking. And granted, like, Moria is what, like 12 years old at this point, so it's not surprising, but it is one of those things where it's just like, hindsight me is like, especially some of the dungeons where it's just like, oh, we usually put so much more extra detail even on the floor level, just like rubble or decals or something. All right, so real quick back to Northdown stuff. Othrakar, I think, was one of the first, you know, one of our first like bigger above ground dwarf settlements, which was really interesting. Like we had a couple in Arid Luin, and they were both like relatively small spaces. I think Othrakar was the first one that like sprawled out a little bit more and kind of showed a little bit more of, you know, dwarves living in a village, like an open air village, as opposed to living in caves, as opposed, you know, compared, you know, it's what we classically think of when it comes to dwarves. So this was really like interesting to build that. All right. So I'm going to run to the south again because there's nothing in these mountains over here. There couldn't possibly be some sort of hidden city of the Rangers that no one knows about at all. You know, so why even bother going to look over there when there's so much more to do this way? So Drogefire says, I love the mix of OG and new and once in return devs to the team. Yeah, I think that speaks a lot to the love that people that have worked on this game have. And hopefully, you know, the new people and the people that have come back after a break for a while, like it's also an opportunity for us to have a changed perspective on what LOTRO is. You know, we've been out of it. So, you know, for me, I was not working on it for 5 years. I was away from gaming for 5 years before coming back to this, and I think for me, it helped me kind of have that break and be like, well, I've had this 5 years of playing video games on my own without being, you know, without being a game developer, and this is kind of how my tastes and whatnot have changed over the years, and kind of reevaluating like, oh well, the way that I thought I had to be as a designer back then isn't the way that I have to be now, because I had my other experiences working in other jobs to kind of be like, well, you know, things like scope are really important, you know, compared to before when I'd just be like, I'm going to passion hours it up. Mary Alice says, how do regions map to servers? Do they scale up and down dynamically with player density? So we have the concept of instance servers, not to be confused with instances. And typically, the way things work is once a player count in a server gets up to a certain level, a new instance server will spawn to help carry the load so there aren't as many players on one single server. That number can vary based off of the region that you're in, depending on the size of the region, how busy we're expecting the region to be. You know, so for example, you know, one region might have a cap of 25 players, at least when it's first launched, because, you know, we expect there to be a ton of people like crushing into it. So we try to reduce the number of people on the server to worry about. As far as like how those servers are physically mapped, I can't speak specifically to that. That is more of an operations thing and not something that I really have much interaction with. Oh look, one of our first landscape expansions ever. Here we are. Where am I on the map? Blah, 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 North Downs, Breland. Here we go. Nenharn, one of our first map expansions. Something we affectionately called Project Koala back in the day. The koala stands for quality. Let's see, a couple more going down through the questions. Let's see, blah, blah, blah. Do you have restricted rules for touching landscape of a different world designer? From Soft Snake. No, we don't really have any restrictions over who can work where on what and when. Usually what we end up doing is we all kind of divvy up the regions, and when it comes to like bug fixing and whatnot, so it's like, oh, so and so gets all of the Lonelands bugs, so and so gets all of the Belphilus bugs, like those sorts of things. And that's really just more in terms of a like efficiency of assignment aspect, so that our QA folks can quickly and easily know like who to give a bug to, as opposed to them having to be like, okay, I'm gonna ask this person who gets this bug, and they may not know, and so it's just known like this person fixes bugs in this area. Um, there may be times where we reach out to and uh, ask for feedback on or information about um, an area that we're fixing bugs in, or somewhere that we're going to do additional work or polish in. But we don't usually say like, oh no, this is the Troll Shaw's, this is Matt's, no one else can touch it. Um, we were talking about what we're working on next in a meeting earlier this week, and there were some questions about like, okay, well, who wants to be assigned, working on this dungeon space or this hub, and the response to that is kind of like, the world team is like pretty well in lockstep. We all work really really well together, and we're all fairly interchangeable in terms of the work we can do. So it's not something where it's like, oh, only this person can do this work. We're all pretty well cross trained, and we're all able to kind of match and meet the style of the work that we want to represent. So was there a story reason for the abandoned beacon east of Authorcar on that hill? I don't know if there was a story reason for that. He says as he runs through Duldainen. Yeah, totally dead end. So maybe it's are the giant rock teeth in northern Nan Amlug East a part of the old border of Runenlad or Angmar? They're scary and unique. I don't know if there is a specific reason for them existing. I know for us, it was meant as a kind of like marking of territory. You cross over this line, and now you're kind of entering lands of the enemy. Like I think the central and western portions of North Downs were very much like the enemy is trying to encroach. It's like working its way there. It's made a couple of footholds, but there's still aspects of it that belong to the Free Peoples. But once you cross into Runenlad and Duldainen, like this really is, Angmar and the orcs have ownership of this. Have we got to the farmer being terrorized by squirrels yet? No, and we're not going to head there yet, or at all. I'm not sure. I actually don't specifically remember where it is. The poor Earthkin. They get no love. I've been trying to champion Earthkin for a while to get people on board with doing more with them, but a lot of people are like, no, we don't want to deal with the Earthkin, and I'm a little sad because of it. I wonder what's up this way. Looks like it's just rocks to me. There couldn't possibly be a hidden pass up through the mountains. And even if there was, surely there's nothing up here. Like, maybe some animals. Maybe. Certainly not a hidden ranger city or anything like that. Why would there be? They have all of Fornos. They could take that back. Why would they need a hidden city here? Oh, spoiler alerts. It's a hidden ranger city. My bad. So the east part of North Downs feels like a connection hub for orcs around Angmar, North Downs, and Moors. Yeah, and I think that's kind of that is very much intentional. You know, that is where, at least in the north, that the orcs have been flowing from. You know, Mount Graham and all of that. You know, let's see, do we have? But yeah, Mount Graham, the stronghold of the orcs. You know, a LOTRO player did the Leo DiCaprio pointing meme when you saw the antler-wearing hunters and the imps. There was at one point when I saw the antlers, I was like, I did have some Earthkin flashbacks when I saw that in the trailer, and then I looked a little bit closer and was like, oh, it's just people. Dasmordo says, big fan of the weather effects. Always love how well it's done when adding to add the atmosphere of the game. Is there a process for that after designing worlds you want to get done, or does someone else just insert appropriate weather afterwards? So the weather systems are built by world and art teams as we kind of go through things. You know, usually we start out with a base day file for a region. So it's just like whatever the like generally sunny day file for the region is. And then from there we go and do, you know, overcast, rainy, and stormy versions. So each region typically, you know, if it's a normal landscape region, each region typically has 4 different day files made for it. And then our system will pick the correct one based off of whether or not the server says, you know, what the server says the weather is. Right now, the server's saying it is stormy because there's lightning going on. One of the things I've been trying to push a little bit more in our more current, more modern region day files is when we get into stormy mode, I really like to pull in the fog a bit, just to kind of make it feel a little bit more hazy and make it feel like it's really like raining heavily. You know, I think that's one of the problems with day files like this, where it's like supposed to be heavy, heavy rain, heavy, heavy storm, is the visibility is still just like too great. You know, you can get the same kind of visibility on like a cloudy or rainy day, but for a stormy day with like lightning and whatnot, you really want to pull in that atmosphere. So more modern regions, I've been tending to do that, at least when I've been the one building the day files. I'm not always the one who builds the day file, but sometimes. Druid's Fire says, and some folks freaking out about hobbits in Second Age. We're all over snickering more Besieged. Yeah, and you know, bringing those kinds of characters into the story of Mordor Besieged, certainly there was a little bit of internal controversy and discussion about it. But I think it was a like fun little nod and something that we were able to kind of pick up the story of elsewhere, you know, in what we introduced later. Was the condition of the statue of Marthiel and Oscurthlank deliberate foreshadowing? I always thought it was clever. I don't think it was intentional. I think it was just done as a like, this is an old statue that's in disrepair, and how kind of like the enemy cares less about maintaining the pristineness of things like this. Still one of our more like impressive POIs. It's fun to just like look at as you walk up to it. All right, so I think at this point we've gone everywhere. There really actually, you know, outside of the Fornos dungeons and a couple of like other minor one-off things, there really wasn't a ton of other things. There is one thing that I found that we can go take a look at as a behind-the-scenes thing that wasn't ever, I think, put into production. But this was something that was done around the time that big battles were being produced. Was, I think, the original developer intent was to do a flashback big battle to the Battle of Fornost. So this is a version of Fornost that has more, intact structures around it, leveraging more of the Numenos stuff in it than just the ruined Arnorian stuff. So this was like an interesting little discovery of mine. I didn't even realize that this was something that was being considered at the time. I don't know how far into things they actually got when it came to putting it together, because this seems fairly light. Not sure what we'll get for visibility. No, it looks like it's always night here. So, alright, do dev stream. So, hi Destroyed. I am a senior world designer for Lord of the Rings Online. So this is my usual behind the scenes show, and it's just about to end. I'm gonna take a look at a couple more questions, and then I think I will wrap it up. In the meantime, thank you everyone for being here. We're excited about LOTRO's 15th anniversary kicking off tomorrow with our update 33 patch. It comes with the Yondershire. It comes with a bunch of our free-to-play changes. I'm not sure when the anniversary festival is actually kicking off, but if it is not kicking off when things go live, it will be doing so very, very soon after, hopefully. But yeah, we're excited about it. It's amazing to think that we've been doing all of this for 15 years now, and honestly, actually working on the game for more along the lines of 20. So we'll cap this off with a view of the big battles of Fornost space that never got developed beyond this. I have not seen the art yet, but I'll be sure to ask him Druid's Fire. So yeah, we'll do these last two questions that I see here, and then I'm going to call it. So I Let the Dogs Out Woof says, will you remake Fornost at its glory like Mordor Second Age? I don't know that it's something that we have any immediate plans to. I think that if it was something that we designed to, there would certainly be a tussle amongst both the content designers and the world designers over who gets to do it. I think we've learned a ton over the years when it comes to building places like this, and I think it would be a fun and interesting challenge for anyone that wanted to try to do that. And then finally, Little Redhead asks, what's keeping you busy in getting ready for the 15th Anniversary Fest? Yondershire, as in what will I be playing? I'm going to probably log in tonight to try to finish up Welkenlofts and the Legacy of Durin storyline. That's what's going to keep me busy. After that, I'll log in at some point to do some anniversary stuff, get my tokens, and get myself some steeds. I think we have steeds for this. If we do, hopefully we do. That's usually my thing whenever I do anniversary, is I log in and get myself some cosmetics and get myself what steeds exist. So, anyways, so thank you all so much for joining me for this stream. I hope you enjoyed it. Next stream is going to be our final Eriador region. It's going to be Breland. So we'll be taking a look through Breland. It's actually kind of fitting that the last region that we look at is kind of one of the first regions that people get to experience. So probably do that in a month or so. Otherwise, I hope everyone has an awesome afternoon. I hope everyone has an awesome week, and I hope they enjoy Update 33 when it comes out. Thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.